She is a reporter for The Athletic, covering women's college basketball and the WNBA. We have the pleasure in welcoming back Lyndsey onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Lyndsey.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back onto the show. Really appreciate it. Really excited to talk with you about the WNBA since the last time under vastly different circumstances during the pandemic. So it's great to talk to you about this league currently. Just a general question. It's real early in the WNBA season currently, but what has surprised you so far? Just the return of Brittney Griner, a lot of super teams. What has kind of caught your eye in the early going of the season so far?
First, has it been since 2020? That's quite a while. I didn't know it had been that long.
Time flies.
Right.
Right, right. Second, I mean, it was we just had one weekend of play. Really, I do weekly rankings that I issue every Monday, and I wanted to wait. I didn't do this past Monday because I wanted to wait till we had some more basketball under our belt before, so we could see some of the storylines come to fruition here. But yeah, I mean, I guess free agency was a bit of a surprise in that way. Seeing players take less money to play with each other and sort of form these quote unquote super teams in the league, um, and then some moves in the draft. I think were interesting. I think Dallas wanted to stock up on the best talent they could, and they're still trying to figure out the kind of rotation, I guess, around Enrique and Ogunbowale. Let me say that again. And yeah, so I guess those were some of the initial things going into the season. Since the season started, um, Seattle, I think, is going to have a rough season. I don't think they were able to really do what they wanted to do in free agency. I know Courtney Vandersloot was considering signing with them, and obviously they didn't end up getting her. And it's Jewel Lloyd's team going forward, and there's kind of a mishmash of players on that roster, and it'll be interesting how that plays out this season. But they're definitely in rebuild mode at the moment, which is a change for them and for that city and that fan base. Vegas is what we've expected. New York, I think we saw in the last game what can happen with them when you have Stewie going for 45. I think the Sparks are going to make the biggest leap this season from last season. Washington, to me, is a dark horse team to win the title this year. They just have a very complete and solid roster. And I think Indiana, out the gate, they're still a young team, but I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch as they grow throughout the season.
So, super teams, you mentioned it earlier, they're controversial. Some people love them, some people hate them. What is your overall opinion of super teams in the WNBA? Is that good for the league, or would you prefer more parity throughout the rest of the teams?
I mean, I think overall there is parity across the board. It's just different levels, and those levels are a lot closer than people, think. Super teams have been part of this league for a long time. Actually, the Houston Comets were the original super team. They just happened to build through the expansion draft and just get the right core of players there. And then the Minnesota Lynx had their run as a super team, and again they did it building through the draft and getting Sylvia Fowles in a trade. So it's not like we haven't seen Detroit Shock. That's another one. It's not like we haven't seen these types of teams with multiple stars on the roster play before. I think what's different about how it came about this season is that it happened during free agency, and we hadn't yet seen that before because the free agency rules didn't really allow for a lot of player autonomy and for players to like sign when they wanted and have that sort of freedom. And since the CBA in 2020 has allowed for that now, free agency is much more exciting. And then you have this happening now. And it's fun. I mean, how much was mainstream media talking about the New York Liberty and then the Aces with Candace Parker? I mean, the attention for the league is great. And I actually worked on an article for Just Women's Sports that came out last week on Super Team, and we talked to Rachel Galligan, and I talked to a bunch of different coaches, GMs, players, former players, people in and around the league, and the consensus was that it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the league going forward, and I tend to agree with that.
Wanted to get your thoughts, Lyndsey, on the buzz around the start of the season. Always like to ask WNBA analysts, what they're seeing, and how the sport is growing each year. Do you feel like there's extra buzz? I mean, no, I know we were going into the 25th season last season, so there was a lot of buzz going into it. Do you feel like that momentum is carried over into this season?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's just been a consistent trajectory upwards for the past 5 seasons. Viewership going up, the buzz, the preseason coverage, the amount of coverage, the amount of visibility, the amount of access and games on national television. I mean, looking at the numbers, it was the most viewed. Uh, there was the most viewed regular season game on cable in 24 years this past
Wow.
weekend between the Mercury and the LA Sparks. And then it was the most viewed opening day on ESPN platforms in 11 years. I think the percentages was 103% um, over last year. I mean, so, and again, if you're surprised by this, then you haven't been paying attention, because this is the momentum that's been happening. And if you look at what happened with the college game and the NCAA championship game on ABC, and the viewership numbers were just blown out of the water, that carried over, obviously, and I think it will continue to do so. We're at a time period right now where women's sports in general is on an upswing, and women's basketball has just taken off.
So, what is best for the league moving forward? Is keeping with this ratings discussion with streaming. A lot of these streamers want live content. That's really kind of a precious commodity compared to other forms of television like dramas and news. Seems like sports is that kind of that gold that's going to get people watching their platforms. So, with the WNBA for the viewer, what is in their best interests moving in the future? Is that staying with ESPN, or is that maybe going to a model like MLS where they're on, Apple TV, where there's no blackouts. You just get all the games with no problem. What do you think is kind of the best model moving forward? Do you think?
I think it's going to be, I think it should be like a cohesive package. All of it, in other words. I know that the TV deal, the media deal with ESPN is coming to an end, and I think the WNBA has more negotiation power heading into signing a new deal. The numbers are there. The viewership numbers are there, and are good bargaining chips. And I think they have to be very smart and calculated about it going forward. I think it's kind of a really big point in the league's history going forward. And as far as streaming goes, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all on the table. The objective is to get more eyes on the game and more eyes on the product, on the players. Again, access plus visibility equals, rise in fans, and that's been the recipe um, for so long, and it just has taken the league, for whatever reason, um, they've dragged their feet on kind of accepting that, but they finally have come around in the past couple years, and they just, like I said, need to be very cognizant of that going forward.
So you brought up the college game and the college tournament that had great ratings, like you mentioned. How do you see the players that were? I I guess what I'm asking, do you see like another foundation of several stars coming in to the league based on what you saw in the college tournament, and what are you kind of looking forward to there? I mean, do you see just marketability like increasingly going up? What are you seeing with, I guess my mind goes obviously Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Haley Von Lith were some of the big sort of standouts, I would say, in the mainstream, like across the board. But what else have you seen?
Yeah, you pretty much, yeah, hit the nail on the head there. Not to use a cliche, but yeah, there's, in addition to the players you just mentioned, there's so many. There's just,
Yeah.
the college game is just bursting with talent right now, and it's so great to see. But NIL has also played a part, like you said, as far as marketing goes. These players now that are coming into the league already have deals, with, whether it be local to their college, or even on the national scale, already have endorsement deals that they can take with them, and that will follow them into the league, and then it could only grow from there. So that, again, visibility. It's funny because I'm actually doing a feature story on a, a legendary player who's still playing right now, and we had, I don't want to say just yet because it's not coming out yet. But we had a conversation uh, during my interview with her, and she touched on that and how just important that is, because that's what you see in the NBA, right? The familiarity with the players, in the NBA, and how they create their own brand, and they have all these endorsement deals, and the visibility is just off the charts. And that's what's happening in the women's game, and it's really getting even kicked up further with all of the NIL deals that are going on in college right now. And it's cool for the players, but it's also awesome for the league because it's just another thing that's going to help continue to grow, the WNBA itself. So, yeah, marketing is a huge part of it.
And another thing, I don't really want to get into the incident itself. I mean, it's been talked about ad nauseum, but another thing in that title game, I mean, the controversy surrounding the end of that game and Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. I mean, in a way, kind of a weird way to think about this topic, but for that to be national news and trending, I think is kind of a landmark moment in some ways too. What did you see as far as like the reaction with that, and would you agree that that's kind of a net positive for women's basketball as a whole?
It's a huge positive. Trash talking is part of the game. It's just there's more
For
scrutiny on
sure.
women when they do it. I was, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. I live in Buffalo, born and raised. And I was listening to this interview, with Coach, Sean McDermott. Uh, I think it was yesterday, and he was just talking about, because he's the defensive coordinator this year. He resumed that role, for this season, and he was talking about how he likes to get the players going, and he loves when they trash talk each other. And I'm like, yeah, and it was just this thing that rolled off the cuff, right? Like, why does it have to be different for women athletes? Like, are we supposed to be demure, and, like, we can't show emotion, and we can't act a certain way, we can't act too aggressive, like, it's just a bunch of bunk. And to see that happen on the national scale, I mean, it was just, for people who had never seen Angel Reese play before and were just tuning into the game because they wanted to see it or it was on or whatever, to be introduced to her that way, and then judge her that way. Obviously, they hadn't seen her play all season because that's who she is. That's who Caitlin Clark is. They're emotional players. They get riled up. They like the chatter, on the court. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Diana Taurasi, and she is respected by so many male players because of her confidence and trash talking.
For
And
sure.
so I loved it. I thought it was great. Like you said, it's a net positive for the women's game. I think it's just, it, like, sort of opened the floodgates in a way to other things. Like, it got people talking about these players, but then it also got people looking these players up, wanting to know more about them. Who is this Angel Reese character? Like, things like that. So, more of that, please. More of that.
Staying on the college game, I heard another podcast, and they were discussing kind of the transition from the college game to the WNBA, and how there's a transition there, and how it doesn't always go smoothly. And ultimately, landing a long-term roster spot on a WNBA team, it might go through different paths. And I just want to discuss kind of what I've been seeing year after year with the WNBA with a lot of just different roster cuts with talented players. And just your thoughts on just the league expanding, because I think Matt and I personally, we grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, huge women's basketball fan base. I think I've been saying it for years. I think Albuquerque would be a perfect spot for a WNBA team. They would support it immediately. So I'm just wondering with the WNBA, what is their mindset in expansion? Is it kind of linking up with current NBA teams, or would they be looking at maybe a lesser market, granted, but a dedicated fan base that would support the team just in the future?
Yeah, so here's the thing that I'll say first is the WNBA has not been transparent about the expansion process. I actually shared a tweet maybe last week or the week before just about a timeline of things they have said within the past 2 years that just don't add up, saying that they've narrowed the city list down to 20 cities, and then they said in at the end of the summer they were going to make a decision by the new year, and then the new year came and nothing was made, and then they said they're still considering expansion, and then now the list is back to 100. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it, and to me them continuing to put out these statements without really having their ducks in a row is just very confusing and frustrating for the fan base. Um, and it's misleading. So like I said, they haven't been really transparent, so I'm not really sure what they're thinking as far as that goes. I was at the Toronto game, um, the preseason game that I feel was more like a test run, and they sold out that arena, and it was incredible. The buzz in the city, the amount of people that were there, the family atmosphere, the diversity of the crowd, men, women, straight, gay, families, young, old, like it was incredible. And I do think, again, the league is at a turning point. We talked about it with the media coverage and the media deal coming up, but it's also at a turning point with expansion. I do think they need to expand. I think the timing is perfect. I also think there needs to be something done about salary cap and roster length. If they could even just add, like, get it up to 15 for each team, it would solve this problem of the lack of development. Some players, like Aaliyah Boston, they're pro ready. They can make that transition. The pro game is so much faster. You need such a higher level IQ, basketball IQ, and it's so much more physical. The strength of the players at the program is so much more it's so strong, much stronger and more physical than the college level. So that's a for some players that's a huge transition, and they need time to develop. How do players develop? You get signed, you sit on the bench, you watch, you learn, you grow in practice. And a lot of players don't get that opportunity because of the lack of roster spots. I think there was what 14 draftees who were waived throughout preseason and during training camp, and there's 12 players drafted in each of the 3 rounds. So that's more than one round of players that aren't getting an opportunity and are more than likely going to have to go overseas to develop their game. So that's an additional problem. But yeah, to answer your question, I do think that the league needs to expand, and decisions. These types of decisions are crucial to the future evolution of the league, and they need to be made sooner than later.
Absolutely. And, another major headline and something that greatly impacted the WNBA as well. He got a lot of buzz for buying the Phoenix Suns, but Matt Ishbia, of course, the owner of the Phoenix Mercury as well. What have you seen from that change in ownership so far in Phoenix? Do you feel as encouraged as people that I've seen felt on the NBA side?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like we kind of need to see a little bit more how this season goes. I thought the way
Sure.
that everything was handled with Brittney Griner was super professional and just really thoughtful and carefully laid out. Her press conference was very well done. How it was organized, how it was available um, for anyone to watch live, not just the media. I thought it was conducted very well. Things like that are encouraging. and not being a beat writer, I'm not on the ground in for with a franchise like Phoenix to really get a feel for it and to see. But from an outside national perspective, I like what I've seen so far.
Staying on the topic of Brittney Griner, what is your thoughts on her, transitioning into the season? Like, I mean, she's been through so much, and basketball seems somewhat trivial in one end, but at the same time, it seems like that's her oasis ultimately, just for expressing herself and just enjoying the game of basketball. So, what have you observed? I mean, obviously, way early in the season so far, but do you think it's going to take her a little bit or more? Do you think fans of Phoenix, particularly, should be patient in terms of her getting back to where she was before everything happened with her?
Yeah, I love how you put that, her oasis, because that's exactly what is coming through, and what you can visibly see the joy in her being back on the court, being able to play this game that she loves. It is her sanctuary, and I think from what I've seen and what I've heard from her in interviews and during that press conference, and then just seeing her play the a couple of games so far, is that she's rejuvenated. She's rediscovered a joy for this game, and I think it's because when you're in a position that she was, um, where you're you don't know if you're ever going to play again, let alone if you're ever going to live your normal life again. Like, I can't even imagine what that was like. But for her, I feel like it gave her um she's got a new perspective, I think, on life, and on the game itself. And it's palpable. You can feel it. I know in and around the organization, people are saying, physically she still needs time to get back. But she had a double double in her last game and like scored like 27 points. I mean, to me, 2 games in and you're already doing that. That's pretty good. I did. I would love it because she's never won an MVP award. She's had the potential, but she's never been able to just get over that hump, and really be consistent throughout the whole season. And I just think what a story it would be if she keeps playing like this and just keeps getting better as she gets more in basketball shape as the season goes on, and then ends up winning the MVP at the end of the season. I mean, that would be pretty cool.
The narrative is laid out there
Yeah, right?
for it,
Mhm.
right?
Well, you bring up that point. I mean, the competition's pretty, stiff for MVP. How much would that be fair for the narrative to be factored in if it's close? Would that push her over the hump, or how would that factor in if it's really close? If we're in a kind of in the NBA equivalent, like a Nikolai Jokic, Joel Embiid, Giannis situation where it's really tight, and then it's like all these intangibles that could separate it. Like, how would that work in a Brittany Griner situation?
Yeah, I would hope that it would remain basketball oriented, and you keep it there, with what was accomplished during the season. I think Elena Deladon has potential to win another MVP this season. Brianna Stewart, but and again, we're only 2 games in, but it's something I want to keep an eye on, because she is right there, and she is the most valuable player, not only on her team, but what she does accomplishes across the board throughout the season. I would hope that, and I'm a voter, full transparency. I would hope that, what, let me put it this way. So, most valuable player is about, what's done throughout the season. Could she win for comeback player of the year? I mean, that's a possibility too. And maybe that's a better fit, but we'll see. We'll see what plays out this season.
Well said. One last question for me. I have to ask because comparisons are thrown out in sports between players in a way that can be kind of gross at times. But quick story time. My son, we're not Golden State Warriors fans. Um, No disrespect, great franchise, whatever. No, no hate intended. Point being, we turn on the TV. My son sees Steph Curry play for maybe 3 minutes, and he's asking us to get Steph Curry book for him the next time we go to the library. So there's just like this instant connection that lots of people have talked about. My question being, with what you saw in the college tournament, is it a fair comparison? And do you see with Caitlin Clark like the potential for that type of transcendence that could bring in a lot of youth fans to the women's game?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about that, I'm not a big, like, oh, Diana Taurasi is the Michael Jordan of the WNBA. I'm not big on those types of,
Sure.
you have to find the male counterpart, right, for the female player. But what I do agree with in this comparison is the thing I love about watching Steph Curry and what I loved about watching him at Davidson was
Mhm.
what he did on, like, it was mind-blowing stuff, right? Especially in the NCAA tournament, what he would do. And I have that same feeling watching Caitlin Clark. And I think that's the similarity that people are vibing with, men or
Right.
women fans, right? Is like you get that same like mind-blowing, like, did she really just hit that shot? Like it's just you're like you just have to shake your head and you have the same response watching Curry. So yeah, and I think kids are drawn to that. It's almost like magical, right? Like
Yeah.
these things that these those two players can do on the court and the shots they can hit. It's almost like it's superhero kind of stuff. Like it's like they have some sort of superpower, right? Because it's not something that you see every day and not something that average basketball players can do. So yeah, I agree with you on that part. I think it's a player like Caitlin Clark in the women's game is can have that same impact for sure.
And piggybacking off of that, just with both of them, I think that is not really, I don't know, presented to, younger fans like Matt's son is the work ethic and how, they don't just magically become great players. They're constantly working all the
For
time. They're
sure.
obsessed with the game. And
Yeah.
I just wish that is imposed on a lot of people that are fans, just like, you know, their work, just the way Steph Curry, his workout routine, just the way I'm sure Caitlin Clark is, working out constantly and just in love with the game. I hope that gets translated to younger fans, just the work ethic that they can achieve what their idols are doing just through hard work and obsession over the game and not just, watching their games on TV, which is important, but the hard work is goes with it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's not like they just go up in the game and then just do it. I mean, they
Yeah.
get up shots constantly. They are
Yeah.
constantly in the gym getting up shots. And I think that's important to note because I think piggybacking on that, some players who go from college into the WNBA may have this notion that they can just make that transition and that it's just, like a snap of the finger and it's not. These WNBA players work out constantly. They are constantly taking care of their bodies. They're constantly trying to get another edge. They're constantly in the gym. You can't make a WNBA roster unless you put the work in. And I think for some players, that's a wake up call.
For sure. Lyndsey, this has been a great discussion. Please let our audience know where they can find you on social media, where they can find your latest works, any other projects you're working on as well.
Yeah, I write about women's college basketball and the WNBA for The Athletic. I also do some work for Just Women's Sports. I'm the co-author of Hail Mary: The Rise and Fall of the National Women's Football League from the 1970s. So that's available now, and I'm on Twitter talking about women's basketball all the time at Dark Angel 21. That's where I'm primarily at.
Awesome, Lyndsey. Thanks for your time again. Truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.